There is more to come. It's going to be a very busy news day and a very busy week, perhaps. I guess that's become the pattern. We're getting word as we are coming on the air from our reporter on the ground in Israel that there may even be coming in the hours a strike on Iran as forces are now in the Middle East, the USS Abraham Lincoln and others. This would be a good time to do a strike for many reasons. It's a little late, though. 30,000 dead Iranians is what we're being told. But it certainly might change the news cycle because the news cycle, frankly, is not going well for this administration. Many of us, of course, were consumed by what was taking place in Minneapolis, including another person killed, an ICU nurse who worked for the Veteran Affairs. He was out on the street, he was protesting, and he was armed. Now, this is, again, one more issue dividing the MAGA base because of really, quite frankly, I believe, irresponsible comments by some of Trump's own people, whether it's Kristi Noem, his head of DHS, or the director of the FBI, Kash Patel, making statements like, he was waving or brandishing a weapon, that it's illegal to go out there and be armed at a protest. Well, I did not see and have not seen any video of him brandishing a weapon, nor is it illegal to go to a protest with, unless I guess you're in one of these cities where you're not allowed to exercise your Second Amendment. Now, is it a smart idea to go and have a weapon on you while you're confronting federal law enforcement? Probably not a smart idea. But that's a debate one can have, and people can choose to do as they do. But it is not illegal. We need to come down on the side of the First Amendment and the Second Amendment. And people do things they shouldn't do. His own parents apparently had told him, don't go out there, don't get involved in this. He did. I'm sure he didn't count on dying that day. And of course, it is emotional video to watch. Nobody wants to see somebody killed. And so, again, a very emotional situation. We can argue it all day long, but I think we should pull back and look at the bigger issue. People are being very much baited into the emotion of the death of this nurse. They are, of course, questioning the actions of the ICE agents, who apparently, some of them, may have indeed feared for their life or serious bodily harm. Apparently, as I've watched the video a gazillion times, heard the words gun, gun several times. And then apparently one of the agents reaches in, takes the gun out of the man's holster, and it is a type of gun that is apparently known to misfire. And apparently, because it's still under review and investigation, the gun indeed does misfire, which apparently triggered, and I say apparently, triggered the agents thinking it was coming from the gun that they had just been warned about, and it spiraled fast. Well, here's the issue in my analysis. I don't believe from my research that ICE are heavily trained to deal with rioters and mob control. They generally, I think, are going into meat packing plants and other facilities, construction sites, and rounding up illegals and processing them. I don't think they have the kind of training that's required for dealing with crowd control and rioters. At the same time, they are being pelted. They're having cars run at them, ice bricks thrown at them. This is, of course, a very dangerous situation for them. One has to question why the administration would go into a state like Minnesota that is run by a governor that many say is really an agent of the CCP. That's their opinion based on his travels to China and other things. A lieutenant governor that is reportedly tied in with some of the signal chat groups and whatnot. That's according to reports. We're trying to verify all of it in real time. And then, of course, you have an attorney general that has been aligned, according to numerous reports, with Muslim Brotherhood. Why on earth would you take a Democrat farm labor state, which merged the Democrat Party with the communists years ago, a captured state in many regards? Why would you take and go in there with ICE in broad daylight and do these kind of attempts? Now, I'm not saying surrender to these people at all. I'm just saying it seemed like, in my opinion, and I could be wrong, that a trap was set, that the administration was baited. Of course, this all escalated quickly with what appears now to be foreign and domestic actors, including not only the CCP and CCP-funded front groups, but apparently the government of Mexico, working in concert with their consulates across the United States of America. More on that later or tonight on Brandon House Live, Peter Schweitzer, in his new book, Invisible Coup. Last week, I said President Trump should likely be invading Mexico and taking that government over. If you want to take over governments, Mexico might be the first one to do, as it is a narco-terrorist state rife with CCP and likely Islamic terror cells as well. And yet now we find out that the Schweitzer book is telling us there are consulates all across America, Mexican consulates, and they are indeed weaponizing the issue of immigration. So with all that as our background, I would think the administration would be very, very careful not to go into a trap where they're looking for their next George Floyd moment. I think they just got it. And there are, of course, people being shipped into there from all over the country, many of these cultural Marxists and anarchist groups, many of the people wearing still their keffiyehs. Again, the red-green axis, or maybe what we would call the black-green axis, the black being anyone that's anti-American, the green being the Islamist. But we all know that the change comes from the conflict. And of course, the Marxists in the Democrat Party do not want to lose all of these millions upon millions of illegals who they can turn into voters and win the election from then on. Isn't that what we played years ago from one of the leaders of this movement? That if we can legalize these people, we can win every progressive election from now on. Now, there are reports that China has been deliberately working to have children born in the United States of America, birthing houses, as many as 10 in Houston alone, birthing houses all over California and America. And these Chinese, basically manufactured babies are born here in America, anchor babies, get their U.S. citizenship, and then they are taken to China, where they are indoctrinated into the CCP worldview, and then they can come back to America and vote. And now we're talking about by 2030, the potential of hundreds upon hundreds of thousands, maybe even 1 million plus. This is immigration warfare, immigration weaponization. And you would think, again, the Trump administration would have been briefed and understood. Now, this is the desire to bait you and gaslight you into something. Let's be very careful. And let's move in there, not in broad daylight, not when we realize they're tracking our plates, they're scanning our plates, they know all of our movements, they're sharing them, and they likely have intel inside the government in Minnesota. I tell you what, let's do this, guys. Let's go in very strategically like a scalpel. We just showed we could do it in Venezuela. Let's send in guys that are specifically trained and go after the biggest hardened criminals first and foremost. Why are we doing this in broad daylight for this confrontation to occur for the cameras? This is much a media war as anything. And I would think President Trump would know that from his years in television. And he's losing that war. And then you bring in this Greg gentleman, Avino, or whatever his name is, the head of ICE. We've been seeing him all over social media and the news. Now, I don't know the man. He's about exactly my age. We graduated the same year. When I was reading up on him this weekend, he may be a fine fella. I don't know. I don't know much about him. But I can tell you, he looks like he comes right out of central casting. Whether he means to or not, he is not a winsome person. He comes off immediately in a way that is not pleasing to the eye or ear. This is not, in my opinion, a guy you want to put up in front of the press. People who are even conservative are having a visceral reaction to him. His haircut alone is odd, troubling. And then his uniform and the comparisons being made by another time and another place I won't even mention. If you were trying to appear as though you were some kind of stormtrooper, they picked the right guy. His antics on the streets, they're highly viral on social media. This does not appear as though this is a serious statesman, but more of a man who's interested in being provocative and in the media. That is not what you need going into a climate like Minnesota. You're playing right into their hand. You are losing the information warfare. You're losing the media game. You're losing the public relations game. And now even the MAGA base is completely, well, divided again as comments are being made by the Secretary of Homeland Security, as I said, and the FBI director. All the goals of the communists and the Marxists and in the uniparty, shall I say, are being accomplished. The Trump team needs to reassess big time. They don't need to give up. They need to go in smart, and they need to go in smartly, and they need to have much better people that they put forward to speak and to address the issue of what it is we're dealing with. Much like we'll do here, and much like we'll do on Brandon House Live tonight. The communist, Marxist, Islamic groups that are warring inside our country, weaponizing immigration, creating chaos in the streets. And of course, they want to slow down Donald Trump from deportation because they need these voters in America to dismantle not only our history and our culture, but to weaponize them as voters. And then you have the problem with the treason that appears to be going on, the insurrection at the state level, from California to Michigan to Minnesota, actors in state government that appear to be providing information, according to numerous reports and sources, to these anti-American groups, these insurrection groups. Why is the administration not out explaining to the American people in a very calm, documented, and visual way with screenshots, manuals, the very insurrection manuals that are all over the internet that anyone can see and read that these people are following? It isn't just one manual. It's multiple playbooks, folks. The administration needs to stop running this from their chest pocket and going off with just unscripted moments. They need specific PowerPoint keynote presentations from someone in the administration to detail who is behind this, what enemy states are behind this, what actors, foreign and domestic, and reveal that this is a battle on our soil for the very issue of American culture, laws, sovereignty, and the attempt to overthrow the republic as we know it. To again, marginalize and characterize all conservatives, all constitutionalists, all Christians, those interested in our own borders, our own culture, our own money, our own laws, for being categorized as the source of all suffering and oppression. That's what they want. What we've been warning about here for how many decades now? The cultural Marxist agenda. The source of all suffering and oppression is Christianity and capitalism. And now they're playing right into that. There needs to be someone in this administration that can explain all this. There was at one time in the first administration, he tried to lay out for President Trump the cultural Marxist agenda from the Frankfurt School. He ended up being fired by a guy named McMaster. Remember him? Sadly, he passed away. This is a big worldview battle. But as we've said, the chaos produces the change. How is this maybe being studied by big tech to get Americans to surrender on both sides to digital IDs so we can have the new norm? Courtney Turner joins us right after this.
News is moving faster than ever, and so are we. Worldview Tube brings you 24/7 live stream coverage and now real-time alerts when it matters most. Once you have the Worldview Tube app installed, exit the app and navigate your way to Settings. In Settings, locate the tab labeled Notifications. Select the Notifications tab. Scroll down until you locate the Worldview Tube app icon. Select the tab, and here you can turn on and customize your notification experience for the Worldview Tube app. News doesn't wait, and neither should you. Turn on push notifications to stay informed. Every headline as it happens.
You're watching Worldview 2, built on the 35 years of Worldview books, documentaries, research, high-profile interviews, and the radio and television broadcasts of Brandon House.
And welcome back to the broadcast. Glad you are with us. Worldview Radio, our website, worldviewradio.com. Well, let me just simply say very quickly, we made it through the storm here in the Mid-South, being Memphis area, but our friends 30 miles to the south as well as those up in Nashville and along the way from outside of Memphis up to Nashville, didn't fare so well. Oxford, Mississippi, about an hour away, is in a horrific situation. Have you seen the videos? Have you seen the pictures? Trees snapping and falling everywhere, closing roadways. Emergency vehicles cannot get through. Some families are trapped on their own property because of the power lines going across their driveway. The work crews, some of their trucks slid into the ditch. It is like a war zone with snapping and falling trees everywhere in Oxford. And I'm just talking about one little area, Oxford, and it's a big path. It's not just that area. We missed it here in the Memphis, Tennessee area by about 30 miles. That's what was barreling down on us. And then the models shifted a little bit. And then up in the Nashville area, many people without power, people who are showing pictures of their thermostat in their home last night down to 40 degrees. What's very interesting is I'm watching some of these folks on social media, or I should say at least my wife is watching some of these people on social media that she knows up there that have multi-million-dollar homes, but yet no generator. Wow, perhaps more money than brains. You can build a multi-million-dollar home but not put in a 30,000 Generac to run the whole house, and they're fleeing, trying to find warmth for their families. I don't know. This is unfortunately the mentality of so many people on the clickbait social media level. It's a lot of hat and no cowboy. Well, we made it for now. The cold is set in, and of course, it's freezing up in parts of the Midwest where you guys are, many of you. But thank you to all of you for the kind letters and emails, wondering if we're okay, but be indeed praying for those who are in this situation of maybe no power for weeks. Weeks is what they're talking about. We'll keep you posted. Now, my friends, I'm going to bring Courtney Turner on here. You need to understand what I just did for you in my opening monologue was 14 minutes. I know this is going to sound braggadocious. It's not meant that way. What I just did in that 14 minutes was with zero notes and no teleprompter. I had no clue what I was going to say until I sat down. I just knew I was going to talk about it. It's very common. I do not script what I'm going to say, even in my mind, before I say it, because that, to me, is a way to really mess up. I do better when I just speak from the heart based on years and years of studying and reading. I didn't need notes. I didn't need a teleprompter to do 14 minutes on that because this is in my heart. It's in my mind. I know it. Many of you know it. We've spent years studying and being students of history and worldview and the Bible. This is what President Trump needs around him. People that know the hard facts and the history and the philosophies of men that are not according to Christ. So he can indeed deal with this, what is clearly not just a national security threat, but a spiritual threat to the country. But yet he appears to be surrounded, not all of them, by many people that are Romans 1 fools, vain, useless, and futile. Apparently, many of them are more concerned about their puffed up lips and their hair extensions than they are being scholars, students of history, common sense. And until they start bringing in people that know this worldview battle inside and out and the strategies and the tactics, they will continue to lose this battle, at least in the media realm, where the cultural Marxists have dominated for decades. Remember, the Frankfurt School said, we're going to come there, the cultural Marxists, and we're going to infiltrate media and education. Media and education. They have brainwashed millions and millions and millions of Americans in our schools and universities. And then what wasn't brainwashed through education has now many of them been flipped through the media, pop culture, and algorithms that are deliberately feeding the division in America. You guys do realize that if you are on the right and you watch videos on the right, on any of the social media platforms, they keep feeding you more information that fits that algorithm of on the right. If people are on the left, they're being fed the algorithm of the left. And this, of course, is creating the division. You might try following and watching several videos from the left. Go and watch videos on the left, how the ICE agents are portrayed, how President Trump is portrayed, how those who are concerned about Islam in the country are portrayed. Go and pull up some videos from leftists. Let that get into your algorithm and then start scrolling on Instagram and other places and watch what the algorithm throws at you. And imagine you're sitting there watching this for days and weeks and months on end. An algorithm that is now throwing the leftist talking points at you about the right. And you can do that on the other side. You can pick up information on the right and watch the algorithm run. And this, of course, is all a part of the division. When the reality is, many of us can agree going down the middle. We've done that on this broadcast since 2020 and COVID with people that I never thought we would find so much agreement with. People that have even worked in the Clinton-Gore White House, like Dr. Naomi Wolf. And yet we agree on so very much. Yes, she's come toward the right, but there are many on the left that have come to the center, and there are many that have never even been engaged at all that are waking up. But I need you to understand, the algorithms are driving this separation in America, and they're also driving false narratives. There's a lot of information out there that is not accurate. There are videos that are floating out there and being passed around by people you would think would know better that are deep fakes. It's AI. They're not even accurate videos, and people run with it. And it is dividing the country more and more. And don't think for 1 minute, this is why President Trump, I think, and others are trying to get a hold of TikTok from being weaponized against us by the CCP. Of course, we now have to bring in big tech. In 2020, I did a show for an hour, maybe it was more than one show, on ID 2020. It was about the United Nations plan to give us all digital IDs, ID 2020. And in 2020, we specifically were focusing on the push by so many names you would recognize and organizations that work with the UN, Bill Gates, Gavi, others, pushing for this for the purpose of vaccination records as well as immigration. One has to wonder, as I've been saying the last several weeks, are we reaching a point, even with this weekend and the tragic death of that nurse on the streets in Twin Cities, are we reaching a point where even many on the center or right will say, Uncle, I want norm? Remember, that's the goal. Chaos. Demoralize, destabilize, chaos, and then the new norm being a technocratic state, a communist or socialist state in the past. Today is being used, I believe, to bring us a technocracy state. How is this all being weaponized by the tech bros and Palantir to bring us to the point where that's where we'll go? We can get all of this under control, have people here, let them stay, go between country to country, make sure they're not double dipping on any kind of payments. If we all just finally surrender to the digital ID, and maybe then we can get crime under control, have a level of peace and normalcy, while we, of course, surrender any privacy. Joining me now is Courtney Turner, who wrote the book with Patrick Wood, Final Betrayal. Courtney, welcome back to the broadcast. There it is, Final Betrayal. And I know you're in the Nashville area. Real quick, give our audience an update on what's happening in Nashville. Lots of people without power.
There are. We've been very lucky. We're about a half an hour south, and we still have power. It is still snowing, but right now it's snowing and very cold. It's very icy. I tried to walk to the gym this morning, and it was a very long, difficult walk because there's a lot of ice on the ground. So, yeah, I think tomorrow's going to warm up a bit. So hopefully that'll melt the ice. And
Indeed, hopefully it will. And of course, our power grid, people are being warned because so many of us are pulling on the power to heat our homes. They're concerned about rolling blackouts now. So we're not out of the window on this yet.
No.
Let's go to my opening monologue here. I've been going 25 minutes. I want to give you the floor. Can you comment on everything I've been laying out here? Some big talking points of what you picked up on what I was saying for the last 25 minutes?
There's so much in there. That was an incredible monologue. So yeah, there's a lot, and I think we could spend hours really picking apart so much of it. A couple of things that stuck out for me, you talked about Rich Higgins, who had sent that letter, and I recommend to anybody who has not. I'm sure most of your audience is quite versed, but if you're not, it's a 7-page document. It's very brief that Rich Higgins had sent and to warn Trump about the cultural Marxist infiltration.
And just one point there, he's in my documentary, Sabotage. Rich Higgins, he's passed away, unfortunately, from a health issue, but he's in my documentary, Sabotage, warning about a lot of this. And he put out the Higgins memo, and I guess the National Security Council guy, advisor, McMaster, fired him. And yet that's exactly the kind of person that should have stayed up close to President Trump.
Without a doubt. Absolutely. Yes, I had met Rich. Yes, I'm very unfortunate that he's no longer with us. He works with Steve Coughlin on unconstrained analytics. I've done many shows. Steve Coughlin's been to my conferences. He's absolutely brilliant. The work he's doing right now, to carry on unconstrained analytics is phenomenal. It can be a little bit dense. It's very philosophically strong. There's a lot of rich history and philosophy in it. So, it takes a little bit of time if you don't have that background, but it's well worth it. I encourage people to go and dig into that material, get some of his books, Misremembering the Left. I definitely really recommend people look at that. Our first podcast was actually 4.5 hours long. We were on Zoom for 7 hours that day. So yeah, he's a wealth of information. But what is happening, I think, is you talked about how emotionally charged it is. And I do think that there's an element, you also brought up the parallel to like the Floyd moment. And I do think a lot of these things are mass scale trauma-based mind control. They traumatize it's such a heightened media moment. And so you have all of this chaos. People are fighting each other back and forth. They sow the division and they amplify it through these social media algorithms. And I think part of what is going on here is really all about building the technocracy. The algorithms are not only emotionally charging you through these various feeds, amplifying these narratives and feeding you things that will, trigger you, quote unquote, whether they make you angry or because that's how they get you to stay on those platforms. But they're also data mining you. They're trying to figure out, I keep saying right now, I don't think they mind dissent. People think that Elon is like their free speech hero and, savior. I don't believe that at all. There's lots of censorship on X. But I think that some of these platforms are okay with dissent as long as they can track it, because that's data for them. And right now they want to watch everything. They're watching your facial expressions, how you respond to this information, what you say and what the resistance is, so that they can monitor that and then know their next steps of how to continue to churn the dialectic, which is, I think, very much what we're seeing right now. And of course, one of the when you've got all this chaos, they need to come in and breed some order. And that is typically those times when we see an amplification and growth of the security state. We saw that after 9/11. And I think right now that a lot of what is going on is this relationship with Palantir. You brought up also TikTok. So the TikTok is very interesting because, of course, Larry Ellison now has a huge stake in TikTok.
Hold right there. Don't go away. The computer is going to take it away. We'll be right back. Courtney Turner will take the floor as we just got a tweet from President Trump that Tim Walz wants to work with him. We'll be right back.
You woke up with a sore throat and a low-grade fever. You know you are getting sick, so here's your choices. You can get sicker and miss work, try to see a doctor this week, or sit hours in a crowded waiting room at urgent care.
I have a smarter option for you. Open your medical emergency kit. Match your symptoms to doctor-recommended prescription in your booklet and take the right meds now and get well faster.
This is not a first aid kit. It's like having an urgent care in your home. It includes doctor-prescribed medications to treat over 39 medical issues like respiratory infections, strep throat, pneumonia, UTIs, and more.
No waiting to see the doctor and no standing in line at the pharmacy. It's right here.
Every home should have at least one medical emergency kit, and here's how to order.
Go to worldviewhealthcare.com. Your kit to treat dozens of common and serious illnesses is rushed to your door. worldviewhealthcare.com. That's worldviewhealthcare.com.
The emergency kit available at worldviewhealthcare.com. Make sure you don't have to go to urgent care. I got pneumonia. I didn't have to go. I took this last year. Stayed at home. Went to bed. All right, welcome back. Glad you're with us. Worldview Radio, our website, worldviewradio.com. Let's go right back to Courtney Turner, co-author of the book with Patrick Wood, A Final Betrayal. Courtney, President Trump has just put out on social media, Governor Tim Walz called me with the request to work together with respect to Minnesota. It was a very good call, and we actually seem to be on a similar wavelength. I told Governor Walz that I would have Tom Homan call him, and that we are looking for what we are looking for are any and all criminals that they have there in their possession. The governor very respectfully understood that, and I will be speaking to him in the near future. He was happy that Tom Homan was going to Minnesota, and so am I. We have had such tremendous success in Washington, D.C., Memphis, Tennessee, and New Orleans, Louisiana, and virtually every other place that we have touched, and even in Minnesota. Crime is way down, but both Governor Walz and I want to make it better, end quote. Notice they're going to go after all criminals. What does that mean? You're going after the gangbangers, those raping children, sex trafficking, and there are a ton of those, folks, a ton of those. Remember all the Americans that have been killed by so many of these illegal aliens we've reported on for years, raped, slaughtered. I mean, horrific. So when they're going after the criminals, great. But are they not going to go after those who are here illegally? Now, obviously, the priority would be the high-level criminals. But it even sounds like right there in that social media post, President Trump is surrendering a little bit. I don't know if they have enough on Governor Walz to kind of push him into compliance for fear of prosecution or whatever else. But needless to say, the Marxists, the enemies foreign and domestic, they are not going to stop. They're not going to now wave the white flag and say, we're done. So I would not look for a lot coming from this. This is kind of like Hamas. Hey, we want some peace. While they rearm, regroup, reorganize. This, too, I think, is a trap. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's very much a trap. And I think it's also a pacification and a diversion tactic. So I think a lot of people see that and will be relieved and kind of start to focus on other things. And I think it might have that kind of an effect. So no. But I think the most important question you just asked is what entails criminal activity. So does that mean the illegals? Does it mean, the high level criminals? What exactly do they mean by that? And how are they going to go after them? Are they going to use this technology to go after them? Those are the questions I'd be asking.
Let's go back to the enemies, foreign and domestic. Here are a map I'll show and explain for radio audience. Mexican consulate network in the U.S. Okay, we're talking about 53 consulates here in the U.S. by Mexico, a narco state. And we'll get into it tonight, but everyone should be reading Peter Schweitzer's book, I believe, on the invisible coup. This is being weaponized by groups inside the country and then nation states from Mexico to the CCP, including them birthing children with the CCP here in America, sending them back to China to be brainwashed and raised as little Marxists, and then sent back here to vote and to lead nonprofits and groups and organizations. The Trump administration, again, I don't know who at what level is explaining this level of coordination. We also are getting reports, we'll get into details tonight, about the groups that are tracking and using information to track license plates and digital data. And then they're turning around, and apparently someone inside state government like Minnesota is giving that to these groups. So when you go through an intersection, like in our town, we have a lot of cameras at these intersections. They're not taking a picture when you run the red light and sending you a ticket. They're not doing that. Some places have that, but that's not what's going on in my town. But almost all the intersections have cameras. As soon as you come into our town, I'm told by city council members, they know exactly who's coming to town by scanning their license plate. They know who you are, and they know who owns that car, whether it's been reported as stolen. And as you move through town, they're able to track your movements. That kind of thing is going on in places like Minnesota. So all they have to do is now grab up the government cars, the ICE workers, the ICE agents, and now they're feeding this information to these groups, which is why they're able to show up in mass when they move into an area to surveil and get ready to do deployment and apprehension. This, of course, means we're in a civil war, but it's also a civil war being, I think, financially funded by enemies, foreign, and carried out by domestic actors. We are in a civil war, are we not, Courtney?
I think we absolutely are, but I think we're in a very complicated war. I know they like to call it fifth generation warfare. There's, war coming from all sorts of angles. But when you're talking about these cameras that are tracking everyone, I think this is what people really need to be very concerned about, and people should be pushing back locally. I think that we can't ignore the fact that we've got midterms coming up. When we had the whole St. Floyd event, we of course had the big election coming up. And I do think they're trying everything they possibly can. These midterms, I think they see as being very significant. And I've mentioned before that there's something called Operation Phoenix. And I've posted the Google Doc. It's in one of my articles as well. So if people want to investigate that further, they're really doing push for AI type of voting structures, but it's all under the guise of quote unquote democracy. We've got the 25th anniversary of America, the birthday of America coming up.
250th, yeah.
Yeah, and their semicentennial, they're using the word democracy, which of course we are a constitutional republic. We are not a democracy, but a lot of this is about a push for AI type voting. Coincidentally, we've also had new legislation passed with the post office that now changes when the postmark will show up. And I can't help but think that that has consequences, potential very significant ramifications for mail-in ballots, right? Because formerly, whenever you drop something off, it was immediately post-stamped. But now it's when the post office registers it. So it doesn't have to be when you dropped it off. And that could have, very significant consequences. So all of these things I think are very important to consider when we look at all the drama and the chaos that's going on in Minnesota and with the immigration and with foreign actors potentially trying to, foreign and domestic, trying to incite more destabilization. And then, of course, they might have a, solution for all of that. Operation Phoenix, I'll just very quickly also say it's a mission to put what they call quote unquote independence into Congress for the midterms. But when you go down the list, a lot of these people are arch technocrats, and they're talking about things like liquid democracy, quadratic voting, ranked choice voting, all under the guise that this will be amplified and more direct kind of democracy, which is exactly what our founding fathers did not want, right? They did not want mob rule. They did not want a direct democracy. That is why we are a constitutional republic. But a lot of people don't know our history. They don't understand how these terms are utilized and how the propaganda inverts the real meaning and the origin. So unfortunately, I think it's become quite effective.
So how do you believe then we're going to be going forward? The tech bros, Palantir, aren't they already embedded with ICE? Wouldn't Palantir know where these people are, both the people they're trying to apprehend as well as knowing the protesters, where they're at? Wouldn't they have all of this data to be able to know who's tracking them, shut them off from access, block them, put in encryption? I mean, isn't there a way to protect these guys so they can go do the job they've been tasked to do without being monitored and tracked?
One would think, so Palantir has had a deal with ICE since I think 2011, but they got $30 million last year in 2025. We have a section on it actually in our book. It's in the chapter on scientific dictatorship about Palantir working with ICE and all of the, various tracking modalities. So I don't know. I mean, they're not using even very normal kind of crowd control kind of measures that don't involve technology at all. And they're not doing that, which makes me think that this is some sort of like a test bed for the data collection.
Okay, let's stop right there. That's what I want to get to. What do you mean by a test bed?
Well, I think that they're kind of using it as, I think we can go back to COVID as a great example. Remember the 6 feet apart? Well, a huge part of what that was all about is creating the technology for the data recognition, for the facial recognition. I'm sorry. When you're 6 feet apart, it works better. And so I think they were doing a lot of testing for that technology during that time. And that was part of what all of that 6 feet apart was all about. I mean, 6 feet apart doesn't do, if you subscribe to the narrative of the virus, of virology, of any of that, even if you subscribe to any of that, which I think a lot of it was, inaccurate, but even if you did believe it, standing 6 feet apart isn't going to do anything. But what it does do is create a space for more accurate facial recognition, and so that they could start to test all of that technology and then be able to utilize it moving forward. So I think that a lot of what's going on here with the ICE and with the immigrants is that they are testing these new. They have some new technologies that have just been added. A new app. I think it was called Elite or something. So I think they're trying to test these technologies, see how they're working. And I unfortunately think they'll get weaponized moving forward. The tech bros are really marching in for creating a full surveillance state. And they have Trump. I feel like they have total control over Trump.
Now, how is this going to play out? Because midterms are coming up. Lots of folks are saying the Democrats are going to win, and then they're going to impeach Trump, and investigation after investigation. So once all of this has been accepted and buried deep into the bureaucracy, thanks to President Trump, they don't need him anymore, right? So now that Trump has implemented it, they can be done with President Trump, and now they can work with the Marxists. Is that where we're going, or more of a communitarian, big government, big business fascism?
I think the latter. So Brzezinski talked about how Marxism would be a stepping stone to the Technocratic era. And I don't want to undermine there's definitely a Marxist insurgency, and that's very evident. But I think it's being used as kind of a problem reaction solution. I'm not saying there aren't true believers and that, there aren't real communists who are, very invested in what they're doing. They absolutely are. And this is definitely a counter-state insurgency. However, I think that the people who are trying to create this technocratic infrastructure are willing to use them as a tool to get to their, essentially, the all-seeing eye, their, panopticon. And I think that's what we're seeing with a lot of this. The Marxism is the stepping stone. It is what's breeding the chaos. It's helping to foment the tensions back and forth. But I think moving forward, really, you can see it in Davos, too, this week. I mean, all the conversation is about AI, and people are now talking about how they've dropped the climate narrative. It's not that they've dropped the climate narrative. The carbon credits are the energy credits that Technocracy Inc. talked about. That's still very much a play. But what a lot of people fail to recognize is that the 17 Sustainable Development Goals is all about social impact finance. So they've admitted, the Club of Rome admitted that, the climate narrative was all about propaganda. It was really just all about creating what their term in the Global Revolution document in 1992 said that their 1972 Limits to Growth document was because they needed to create a common enemy. And so they decided that the enemy of humanity was man himself. And so I think that the fact they've already admitted this to us, what they're doing now, but a lot of people are saying, oh, they've dropped that narrative. I don't think they've dropped that narrative. I think that because AI will take over, and AI exposes the hypocrisy. What you're in Memphis, right, which is where the Colossus supercomputer is. It violates the Clean Air Act. All these people who told us that the technology was going to bring us to, this clean energy and it was going to save the planet. And meanwhile, he's using methane gas turbines, violating the Clean Air Act.
Hold right there. We'll be right back with Courtney.
Water.
Don't go away.
Introducing the Sentry Wellness System, the ultimate under-sink water treatment solution designed with you in mind. Say goodbye to harmful toxins and hello to water enriched with essential nutrients like calcium and magnesium. Enjoy the benefits of increased pH for on-demand alkalinity, all from a zero-waste system that fits seamlessly into your home. Installation is a breeze, taking just 15 minutes, so you can have clean, healthy, great-tasting water straight from your tap. Perfect for apartments, homes, rentals, and even RVs. Elevate your hydration and well-being with the Sentry Wellness System because you deserve the best in every drop.
Sentry H2O. Tap into wellness.
You're watching Worldview 2, built on the 35 years of Worldview books, documentaries, research, high-profile interviews, and the radio and television broadcasts of Brannon House.
Welcome back. Glad you're with us. Worldview Radio, our website, worldviewradio.com. Be sure to stay tuned for Crosstalk with Jim Schneider coming up at the top of the hour, 2 p.m. Central, on this VCY terrestrial station you're on, unless you're on WROS out of Jacksonville. The rest of you, of course, can jump over there if you want to, vcy.org, vcy.org at 2 o'clock for Crosstalk with Jim Schneider. America's original Christian talk program since the 1970s. Last night I did lesson 3 on the book of Daniel. We went through last night. We finished up Daniel chapter 1, preparation of the heart. Wise preparation of the heart is necessary before resistance. Preparation of the heart before resistance. You'll find it at worldviewtube.com on demand. I hope you go through that with us as we study verse by verse through the book of Daniel. Again, last night at our church service, 8 p.m. Central on Worldview Tube, now available on demand at worldviewtube.com. Joining me is Courtney Turner, co-author of the book with Patrick Wood, Final Betrayal, available on Amazon. Gold, as we're on the air now, is up to about $5,032. We're over $5,000 an ounce, $5,032. Silver is at about $108. It had gotten up to about $112 before we went on the air. So we do seem to be having a banking crisis, a liquidity crisis, a repo market, overfunding, over the night funding of banks, short-term loans. The Japanese yen seems to be in big trouble. It looks like our Fed is rushing in to try to help them. This is all very good timing in one respect for the bankers, because Americans are distracted by all of this while we have a serious banking crisis. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of that banking crisis is also manufactured. I think they really want to move us into some sort of a digital currency. We have a whole chapter on the cryptocurrency infrastructure. And of course, the Genius Act has been signed. The Clarity Act and the Stable Act are still in the works. And I unfortunately think that they will be signed as well. They're really creating this whole regulatory infrastructure for tokenization. And Larry Fink has talked extensively about tokenization. Anybody who's following what's going on with the Great Trust, the Board of Peace and rebuilding Gaza, they're literally talking about this tokenization of the real estate. So I do think that that is a technocratic blueprint. Of course, same thing with what's going on in Ukraine. And, all of these technologies are coming out of Silicon Valley. So this is really... you had brought up the TikTok, and I think it's very relevant as well, because it is Larry Ellison, his son, with his dad's money, just bought Paramount, and now they're trying to get Netflix. They want to be able to get CBS, CNN, all of the media, and then of course TikTok is a huge social media outlet, so they can control all of the narratives. It's just Operation Mockingbird 2.0.
So the big picture here is thesis and antithesis, idea, opposite idea, conflict between the two groups until the bulk of people get tired and will surrender to their masters, thinking that it will bring peace and normalcy once again. That's what's really going on here. And of course, it's being driven by the algorithms, as I said earlier in the broadcast. And of course, that doesn't mean that there aren't Marxist states, Islamic states, people foreign and domestic that are highly ideological, committed to their worldview. But this is going on and being, I believe, used to prepare people for what's coming. In other words, it's like the quote I like to give from James McGregor Burns, The Power to Lead in 1984. The founding fathers have been too shrewd, too smart for us. Frail tinkering and bridges won't get the job done. We can only get the American people to go where we want them to go under a stupendous national and economic crisis. And that seems to be being manufactured and fanned and highlighted now. Also, of course, giving cover to the crisis in the banking and economic situation. So some of this is the globalists, the technocrats, using all of this to carve out society as we know it. In other words, build back better, to destroy the old system and then bring in the new. As we warned years ago, the Marxists and the Islamists are being used as the junkyard dogs to de-Christianize at the West, to destroy the Republic, and then offer up a new alternative, correct?
I think that's exactly what's going on. And yes, of course, there are Islamicists, there are Marxists. All of that is very valid and it's very real and it's very problematic. But I think that these globalists and the technocrats are using those ideologies and those tensions in order to advance their agenda. You know, it is the old, order out of chaos, right? It's the perfect, they can come in with their solution, which is all of this order. You're going to have people who would never have wanted any kind of digital surveillance begging for digital IDs, begging for these kind of tracking and tracing surveillance kind of metric in order to have some sort of restoration of what they think is going to be normalcy and security. We saw this, right after 9/11. It was astounding to watch. And you brought up also the potential war. I think there's another parallel there too, because Bush was really hated until we went into war, and suddenly he was able to garner all that support, and then people loved him and rallied behind him. And I'm not saying that that's intentionally what's going on, but history can sometimes be a good indicator.
Investor Ray Dalio has just put out today, it's happening now. The existing fiat money order, the domestic political order, and the international geopolitical order are all breaking down. Now, whether that's, of course, manufactured or doing it naturally, I would say it's being helped and pushed. So, but we're also, of course, at the end from all the debt they've created, which was on purpose again, because through this continuous process of inflation, we can steal the majority of the wealth of the people, and not one man in a million will know what we're doing, said John Maynard Keynes. So all of it, frankly, has been manufactured, or whether they know it or not, they did it. Ideas have consequences. He says, so we are at the brink of wars. There you go. So what do? You go to war. He says it's all happening because of the big cycle that is driven by the 5 big forces I've described repeatedly and laid out in detail in my book. So there you go. It does look like we're going to have global wars now. And of course, you can expect the tech pros and Palantir and all of them to be involved in that, right?
Absolutely. They're involved currently. I think they've done a huge test bed with both Ukraine and Gaza. Both Oracle and Palantir have played a tremendous role in both regions. And I think that the amount of defense contracts that they've gotten just in the last year alone is astronomical. So, I think they'll play a huge role.
CourtneyTurner.com, CourtneyTurner.com. You can get the book that she's co-authored with Patrick Wood on entitled Final Betrayal. You can get that at Amazon, Amazon.com. The Final Betrayal. A fascinating read. And as always, Courtney, thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hold right there, Courtney. We're going to say goodbye to our radio stations and come back with you for just a few more minutes. Be sure to stay tuned with Crosstalk coming up right now at vcy.org. You're on one of their terrestrial stations. Stay right where you're at. Otherwise, vcy.org. Take care. And we're back with Courtney Turner on WROS out of Jacksonville, Florida, and you here on Worldview 2. Peter Schweitzer has a little documentary short documentary out promoting his book with some shocking information as well. And it has to do with China. And yet China, we know, in many regards, is winning the AI war. There's social credit scores, so much that's going on over there. And it seems as though that's where we're going. The Great Reset a few years ago was being talked about at the World Economic Forum. And who was their first speaker out of the gate? Xi Jinping. So, folks, listen to what Peter's saying. But yet remember, the globalists are working with these characters. They are not so much the enemies of the globalists at all. They're the enemies of America, our Constitution, our way of life. But they are the partners, which, of course, is part of the Hegelian dialectic, to play their role. But I do believe they want a world much like is in China. But to do that, they have to bring down this beacon of freedom and liberty, America. Listen to this.
China has only 5 consulates in America. Great Britain, only 8. Mexico, more than 50. They're not just issuing passports. The Mexican government has built a sophisticated political machine inside our country that pushes migrants to resist assimilation, lobbies our politicians to put Mexico's agenda first, floods 1 million Spanish-language Marxist-inspired textbooks into our children's classrooms, stokes anti-American hatred and social chaos. It isn't random. It's an invisible coup. Now, for the first time ever, the best-selling investigative journalist of our time, Peter Schweitzer, blows the lid off Mexico's election machine inside America. The Invisible Coup, how American elites and foreign powers use immigration as a weapon. Available everywhere fine books are sold.
All right, there you go. And of course, who is the second trading partner? I think the second biggest trading partner to Mexico? China, the CCP. So don't think that they aren't in part behind this agenda that's running through Mexico and their 53 consulates here in America. But this is who they put up. Xi Jinping at the Great Reset conference a few years ago, the first speaker out of the block, Xi Jinping. Speak to that, please, Courtney.
Yeah, well, China is the test bed. Anybody who's read Michael Dukakis's Remaking the World Towards the Age of Global Enlightenment, this is the blueprint for the AI World Society, which is the centennial vision for the UN 2045 to have an artificial intelligence world society. They say it'll be a bunch of nodes that, they call them the C40 cities, but it's all just smart cities, whatever name you give it. And they say that Ukraine will be the central node, but they talk about how China is the model, essentially. And the model is this social credit system. So when you hear people like Elon talking about a universal higher income, it's not going to be a universal higher income. It's going to be a conditionally based income. It is a social credit. They keep talking about these academics who are studying this new technology, that we're moving into this Web3 spatial computing. 6G is coming on the horizon. Of course, China is leading the world in the R&D on 6G. It's not slated for 2030, but we've heard Trump talk about it. And if he can be the 6G president, I think he'd love nothing more than to do that. If you look at the regulatory infrastructure set up for 5G, it does not limit itself to 5G. It does extend to 6G. So I don't know if we'll get there because the technology really isn't quite there. However, 6G does completely change, the world of the internet and how we interface with it. But these people are talking about socio-technical, cyber-physical, cybernetic organisms. A cybernetic organism, once you have the tokenization, you have the 6G, think about the nudging implications of that. Think about the gamification of people's lifestyles. And that is what a conditionally based social credit score does. And so China is, of course, the model. We, of course, have Silicon Valley technology that has been used in China for a very long time. Oracle has been very involved in building that infrastructure to allow them to have that technocratic state. And I think they were the model, and it is going to be exported. But of course, it's going. I think what we're headed towards is really what Orwell predicted with these three technates. So you've got the technate of America, which Technocracy Inc. talked about. This is the Technocracy Study Course, and this is exactly what that technate looks like.
From the 1930s,
Mexico, right? It includes Greenland, it includes Venezuela, and then so that would be Oceania, right? And then you've got Oceania, who is always at war with East Asia, and we've got China, who looks like they would take control of the global South, who has been groomed to be human capital for decades now. And then you've got Russia, which is already talking about merging with the EU and their economic powers joined together. We've heard Putin talk about that. And that would be Eurasia. And Russia's already a technate, and so is China. So, Orwell is looking like it was a kind of a...
Not to mention you got the UN and the Club of Rome and EU Commission calling for 10 regions of the world, which fits with Daniel and Revelation. So I'm looking for those 10 leaders of those 10 regions of some kind, 10 powerful leaders, of which the Bible says will work with a one world leader as well. Fascinating conversation as always. CourtneyTurner.com, CourtneyTurner.com, and also be sure to get the book by her and Patrick, The Final Betrayal, on Amazon. Thank you, Courtney. Great broadcast. Thank you for listening. Back tonight with more. Take care.
Thank you.
You're watching Worldview 2, built on the 35
Colonel Rob Manus has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation, having worked